you want to catch people and help them to succeed rather than pick them up after they've failed. Yeah, it's something which, if you remember, I mentioned the business strategy game element. I've been using that since 2016. And one of the things that appealed to me about the design of the simulation, the business strategy game simulation, was the fact that there were multiple elements in it that helped students to engage. So, for example, you ask them to read the handbook, which is how the simulation works, and you give them a little quiz. There's a multiple choice question exercise, which I do it as a small percentage of their module mark, and it's not so much that it's going to kind of ruin their degree or be a real issue, but it's enough that it matters. And I think in terms of incentivization, I think very often having some sort of grade element to those resources that you really say that they have to engage with is probably one of the most common ways of putting an incentive in place. I'm not sure I would necessarily subscribe to the attendance contribution in class type frameworks and models that I know I know that's quite common in the US, and I know some of my colleagues who've taught in the US have brought that to Exeter. I'm not a big fan of that personally, because I think it's well, as we said earlier, I think as a teacher, you've got to make the face-to-face things compelling rather than putting in some sort of penalty for not getting involved. So from my point of view, yes, I think there's definitely benefit for that. And the good thing about the simulation is that because they do the quiz, because they reflect on the process and what the simulation's about, it actually means that they make a better contribution in the simulation itself when they're working in the teams running the company together. Because they've read the handbook and because they've taken the quiz, then they make a much better job of that. But also from my point of view, I can see who the weaker students are, either because they haven't engaged or because they're perhaps struggling with some of the materials. So it allows me to target usually quite a small group, it has to be said, and actually work with them more intensively to bring them up to speed. And I think that's also an important element. Very often, when you look at a lot of curriculum in higher education, it tends to be that there's an assessment at the very end. And to my mind, that's actually quite weak design from a pedagogical point of view. What you want are more staging posts. So in a sense, if you put incentives in which are to do with exercises that have grades, it's actually good for you as a teacher because it allows you to understand where your students are much earlier on in the module, and that means you could intervene for those students that are struggling, rather than it coming to the end and then they're into the sort of resits territory, which is not healthy for anybody. You want to catch people and help them to succeed rather than pick them up after they've failed. And I think from my point of view, that having those early incentivized exercises is quite a good way of doing that. The simulation works in a similar way because there are multiple rounds as well. And you can set up to 10 rounds. Each round is hypothetically a year in the life of the company, even though it's often played out over a week or a few days. And as the results come out for each round, one of the things I do is I have consultancy meetings with the groups of students so that the teams can come and book a consulting meeting with me. And we talk about the performance of of their team, the company. I don't tell them what to do, but I act as a sounding board and a sort of a coach so that they can throw ideas at me and we can kind of think about things together. And again, that's very helpful. They tend to learn a lot from that process. and that's actually quite informal. It's not a classroom encounter. It's something that happens in my office hours, as it were, or in time booked, just groups of students coming onto my office, or meeting on Zoom or Teams. So from that point of view, I think that small incremental elements counting towards the grade as an incentive to look at certain things actually works very well. Certainly in the business the business subjects I teach, so strategy and marketing.